Hi guys, so this is the second of two shorter PowerPoints. This one's about safety, specifically licensing and safety, because once again, the entire mission statement of community care licensing is keeping children and adults healthy and safe. We also need to communicate safety really well to our families, and we need to keep our staff safe, which is usually harder than it is keeping children safe, because I have seen adults do some really silly things. So this is from the Department of Education, and these are all real life pictures from child care safety locations. So it's pretty bad. Some of them, like this is in somebody's house, but there was some mold growing on the ceiling. And I mean, I've had leaks in my roof before, and it's really easy to get mold. But you really just have to take care of it and get everything kind of cleaned up. Knives, easily accessible to the children. So this is a children's drawer with children's spoons and super sharp knives. Lighter fluid out and about for children. Mold growing outside along with standing water, which would be fantastic for breeding mosquitoes. And then our typical kind of arch drawers, but then in the back you can kind of see some suspicious looking chemicals and things like that as well. So if you want to see some really scary child care lapses, definitely take a look at this video that I am kind of linking for you guys. I'm not going to play it though. So it is really, really important that we have safety in a few different ways. The first, I'd say the overarching thing is our background checks that we need to have done, especially if you want to have your permit. I just got mine done because I needed to renew my program director. So background checks are highly, highly important, not only for our teachers, but for any of the staff that work at a child care center or FCC home, or anybody who lives within the home but isn't teaching children at an FCC as well. Everybody should be CPR and first aid trained as well. And I think that's really, really, really important. Licensing has regulations about who needs to, but I think the need really is that every single person should have up-to-date CPR and first aid, specifically pediatrics, since we're working with children. How do we have accident reports? So an accident report is just a really simple form because a child fell down, they got a scrape, a bruise, and then an incident report is, the traditional incident report is something that would go to licensing, but we might also have an incident report that goes to the parents as well that might detail more, if something happened to the child and it was a bit more than an accident report as well. We need to plan and practice for the worst. We need to know how to store all our materials and medications, and we need to have safe space. So outside, that would be 75 square feet per child on a playground space. That's enough. That's what community care licensing has determined is the kind of safe amount to have enough space for children. And then also safety as far as nap time, where children sleeping, having enough space in between the naps and the cots so that children are not sleeping next to each other. Some of the policies and procedures, we should have a safety checklist. The UCSF has probably the best one. That's now a PDF that's fillable. So you could take it and subscribe it to your actual location. You need to have some kind of maintenance log, especially for the chemicals that we will be using, where they are locked and stored. If you're lucky enough to have a maintenance person, that would be great. We need to have fire and lockdown and earthquake emergency drills, not just the policies and procedures, but training for the staff and how to do it. And then also preparing the children, because they are little infants and toddlers and preschoolers. It's very loud, it's very scary. So what can we do to support children? And then disaster preparedness procedures and supplies as well. So if you did need to shelter in place because of an earthquake or anything else, like maybe a lockdown or an active shooter, having enough supplies, procedures, and kind of toileting for children as well. And then serious injury and illness plan. It's optional to have, but it's good to have that it's optional, but it's probably a good idea to have some kind of plan if a child, breaks a leg, has some kind of serious injury or illness, such as really severe epilepsy, to have a plan in place. The first time I had to send the child to a hospital with really, really severe epilepsy, we didn't really have a plan. So it's just like, I just sent the teacher in the ambulance with the paramedics and I followed in my car, which turned out to be good and kind of became our policy. So sometimes you might have an individual one based on the individual needs of a child, like that, but tracheotomy, you're probably going to have their own special education and illness plan in order to help manage those types of behaviors, and medications and safety that they might need as well. Staff safety, you're going to need injury, accident, incident reports for your staff as well. You're going to need to know where to go if they're injured, so workman's comp, which they might be eligible for. The only time I had to do that, a child bit me through my jeans and caused me to bleed, and so I had to go to workman's comp and bloodborne pathogens and all that because it made me bleed. Yearly on-the-job training as well, which is super, super important. Typically, I like to cover back safety and lifting children because those are the most common injuries within childcare. So back safety, how and when you should and how to correctly lift children. And then team discussions on workplace hazards, how to improve program safety, because like I said, staff is typically pretty bad about this, or we're so consumed with the children that we don't often think about ourselves. I think the worst one I ever saw is I went into a preschool classroom and they were hanging things from the ceiling with thumbtacks. But standing on a rolly chair. And like they didn't even realize, and I was like, there's so many things wrong with this. And then once they took a step back, they're like, oh yeah, that was pretty bad. I'm like, yeah, it was really unsafe for you, and like thumbtacks. And then our janitors and cleaning staff, what they do can be fairly dangerous, especially if we're lucky enough to have like yard maintenance and things like that. Most of the people who do that know the training that's required in it. But also with our janitors, they also come in contact with chemicals and materials like that. And so they're gonna need OSHA training to make sure that they know how to prepare and store these materials correctly. So we also want to communicate with our families. So how do we keep your child safe? We want to tell them about our ratios, what our supervision is, how we're going to tell you if a child gets hurt. We need to be very specific about sign in and out procedures. A lot of places now have codes to get into the building. So who should have the code, who should not have the code, who's on the emergency sheet. I have every person I've ever met in my whole life on my emergency sheet. No, I mean, I have like a lot of friends and family, just in case I ever got stuck at work or with anything. I have a lot of people that I can call to get in, but not everybody knows the code to get in. And so that would be something that they're on that list, but then I also give them the code over the phone as well. Their regular review of emergency contacts is really important to make sure that those contacts still live in town. I had this happen one time. We had a fire that we had to evacuate for. Mom was deployed and dad was doing some training, and all of the emergency contacts had moved away because this was the military, and we had that child by ourselves in the center. Everybody else was gone. The fire was not a problem. We could kind of shelter in place at that point. The winds had shifted, but we were alone. Me and my admin assistant were with this child for like 5 or 6 hours until we could find somebody. Then we also want to involve parents in fire drills, lockdown, and evacuation. I think it's important because we're working with such little ones that when we do get advance notice, that we allow the parents to stay and help their children through this, because it can be really scary, especially the active shooter drills for some children, or just children who have sensory needs. This flashing lights, it's so loud. So part of that is preparing children to be able to handle it emotionally and mental health wise. So how, as teachers, are we going to prepare children for that, and also parents as well? So if you have a child that's going to be sensitive, asking the parents to stay or getting their feedback on how you yourselves can support the child. So this is the unusual incident or injury report that you would send to licensing, and it's really, really important that you do send this. It's typically if anything unusual happened, such as like a communicable disease. So if somebody had mumps or measles, and measles has been more of an issue, coronavirus right now as well. If there was any suspected child abuse, incidences that put a child in danger, and injuries to children that require medical intervention. So I had a child break their arm on a monkey bars, and I had a child basically and he kind of jumped off of the playground. He was like 7 or 8. And he like jumped, tripped, and fell all at the same time, some kind of weird gravity storm, and broke his foot. And so I had to send it for that. Those are the last ones that I kind of remember having to do. You should definitely let licensing know, and licensing is going to come out and they're probably going to hit you with something. But it's always better to be upfront about what happened and be in the clear and be totally transparent, because your analyst is going to appreciate that. Licensing is going to appreciate that. We want to be best practices and we want to show best practices. Yes, it sucks when we say, hey, we did something happen, and then they come out and say, yeah, this happened, and then ding us on top of it. But it is important because these are unusual incidents. These are big kind of things: mumps, measles, child abuse, child breaking arms. Those are things that licensing should know about. And it does happen. I mean, my kid broke her arm falling off a swing in my backyard. I'm sure she's going to break her arm at school someday because she is that type of child. The most common deficiencies within licensing as well. So they come out, they're either doing their annual visit, or a parent has called, or there's been an unusual incident. These are the things that most people get hit with as far as safety. So the number one is disinfectants, cleaning solutions, poisons, other items that could pose a danger if readily available to children shall be stored when accessible to children. So what licensing kind of deems as inaccessible is outside of the classroom, obviously, in some kind of shed that is also locked as well, that children can't get to. So the best place I ever had that I never got hit with was a breezeway right next to, outside of the program, in a locked shed that was right next to our washer and dryer. That was the best place, never got hit with it. Each child also shall be accorded safe, healthful, and comfortable accommodations, furnishings, and equipment. So typically if they come and they see that there's a rip or tear in the cot, or the cots are too close to each other, if you have a soft couch and there's also a rip in it, if rugs are flipped up, all of those can be a safety hazard, which they'll ding you for. Prior to working or volunteering in a licensed child care facilities, you have to have your criminal record review and obtain a clearance or criminal record exemption, or if you have anybody living in your house and you're an FCC provider. And that's a big one too, is a lot of times people forget about those volunteers. And we're so lucky. We have some, like my daughter's school has master gardeners that come every week and just weed and garden. And you wouldn't think that they should have a criminal record or clearance, but they should, even though they're maybe not interacting with children, they're still on that site and location. Big one is left without supervision, including visual observation. They needs to be clean, safe, sanitary, and in good repair. And that's if like floors are coming up, rugs are flipped up, there's chipping in walls or in stucco outside as well. And then this is a big one too, is that incident report that I was just talking about. So this one that we were just talking about, within 24 hours of anything happening, you need to get it to licensing as well. Disaster planning is so good. And actually I have a complicated history with child care licensing. I think most of us do. I've been hit for things before, like having taco shells for staff and just being up in juice and things like that, that I felt was unfair. But at the same time, I do think that they have gotten better. They've gotten better with the times. They have better internet service. They have PDFs. I mean, back in the day, it was a copy of a copy of a copy, and you can never get a fresh one, and it sucked, and you had to communicate by fax. And now they have a much better website. Their resource and referral is much better. With their fires, with coronavirus, with FEMA, anything like that, they've been better about having information on their front page of their website, which has been fantastic. They have a disaster planning guide, which I think is really, really much better than it was as well. So I've seen community care licensing kind of change over the last 19 or 20 years and improve for sure. And so I know some of you are opening right now during this coronavirus COVID, and I've heard that licensing is having regular visits with each other, and I really hope that they are supportive and helpful kind of in this crisis, because we are providing essential services. So these are the 5 R's of medication. So the right medication given to the right child, using the right amount at the right time, given by the right route. So it's the right medication. So double checking that you have, amoxicillin or whatever it is, making sure that you have the right child. And I was always like, of course I'd have the right child. And then I had twins. And my twins don't look super similar, but they have the same last name. They have the same middle name. They just have a different first name, and they look fairly similar because they are twins. And once I had that, I was like, oh, now I can see why you need to have the right child. Like, imagine if you had identical twins, you need to make sure that it's the twin that needs it. One twin might be allergic to something that somebody else isn't. And then it should be the right amount. So double checking that you're taking the right amount of amoxicillin. And then it should be given at the right time. Typically the parents will give it in the morning, in the afternoon, and you might just have it to give it once a day. And then it also needs to be the right route. Is this in their eyes? Is this in their nose? Is this in their mouth, ears, anything like that as well? We need to check to make sure we have parental permission, so it needs to be in writing and filed in the child's record. There needs to be a label with the child's name, dosing instructions, and special instructions. You need to have a standard form that you use to keep track of medications given and to notify parents. So we have our locked medication box, and then we had a locked box within our fridge, which was in kind of our sick area. And then we had a clipboard and with lots of paper that noted every time children were given medication, and we kept that. And then you also need to have a nebulizer consent if you are also going to be doing that. And that is also on licensing as well. You can just, if you literally just Google nebulizer and licensing, it will come up too. And sunscreen as well. So sunscreen has been title licensing needs to get written approval instructions from the child's authorized representatives. So this is the parent or guardian for the administration of sunscreen, and this needs to be kept in a child's record. So this is the form if you ever wanted to go to it. So this is the licensing form about sunscreen that each child should have, and then they should also have their labeled sunscreen with them as well. So in conclusion, it's our responsibility to keep children safe, and community care licensing, this is their number one concern when they are looking at early childhood programs. So we should be working together to support those regulations to make sure that they are supporting us in our systems and in our trainings so that we can keep children as safe and as possible. All right, I will see you guys online.